Now read this.
Hello and welcome back to Now Read This, the Chronicles of Prydain, Book 4, Taran Wanderer, Chapter 17, The Weir. While Gurgi lingered in the cottage, Taran followed Lonio to the riverbank. On the way, whistling merrily through his teeth, Lonio stopped to peer into the baskets, and Taran noticed one of them held a large beehive, undoubtedly the source of the honey which had sweetened Goywin's cake. The rest, however, stood empty. Lonio merely shrugged his shoulders. "No matter," he said. "Something will surely fill them later. Last time a flock of wild geese flew down to rest. You should have seen the feathers left after they'd gone, enough to stuff cushions for every one of us." By now they reached the river, which Lonio named as Small Avron, since, farther south, it flowed into Great Avron itself. "Small it is," he said, "but sooner or later whatever you might wish comes floating along." As if to prove his words, he began hauling vigorously at the net staked along the bank. It came up empty, as did the fishing lines. Undismayed, Lonio shrugged again. "Tomorrow, very likely." "How then?" Taran exclaimed, feeling as perplexed as he had ever been. "Do you count on baskets and nets to bring you what you need?" He looked at the man in astonishment. "That I do," replied Lonio, laughing good-naturedly. "My holding is small. I work it as best I can. For the rest, why, look you, if I know one thing, it's this. Life's a matter of luck. Trust it, and a man's bound to find what he seeks, one day or the next." "Perhaps so," Taran admitted, "but what if it takes longer than that, or never comes at all?" "Be that as it may," answered Lonio, grinning. "If I fret over tomorrow, I'll have little joy today." So saying, he clambered nimbly into the weir, which Taran now saw was made not to bar the flow of water, but to strain and sift the current. Balancing atop this odd construction, seeming more crane-like than ever, as he bobbed up and down, bending to poke and pry among the osiers, Lonio soon gave a glad cry and waved excitedly. Taran hurriedly picked his way across the dam to join him. His face fell, however, when he reached Lonio's side. What had caused the man's joyful shout was no more than a discarded horse bridle. "Alas," said Taran, disappointed, "there's little use in that. The bit's missing, and the reins worn through." So be it," replied Lonio. "That's what Small Avron's brought us today, and it will serve, one way or another." He slung the dripping bridle over his shoulder, scrambled from the dam, and with Taran following him, set off with long strides through the grove of trees fringing the river. In a while, Lonio, whose sharp eyes darted everywhere at once, cried out again, and stooped at the bottom of a gnarled elm. Amid the roots, and for some distance around, mushrooms sprouted abundantly. "Pluck them up, Wanderer," Lonio exclaimed. "There's our supper for tonight, the finest mushrooms I've ever seen, tender and tasty. We're in luck today." Quickly gathering his finds, Lonio popped them into a sack dangling from his belt, and set off again. Following Lonio's rambling, halting now and then to cull certain herbs or roots, the day sped so swiftly it was nearly over before Taran realized it had begun. Lonio's sack being full, the two turned their steps back to the cottage, taking a path different from the way they had come. As they ambled along, Taran caught his foot on a jutting edge of stone, and he tumbled head over heels. "Your luck is better than mine," Taran laughed ruefully. "You've found your mushrooms, and I, no more than a pair of bruised shins." Not so," protested Lonio, hastily scraping away the loam partly covering the stone. "Look you now, have you ever seen one so shaped, round as a wheel and smooth as an egg? A windfall it is that needs only the picking up." If a windfall, Taran thought, it was the hardest and heaviest he had stumbled on, for Lonio now insisted on unearthing the flat rock. They did so with much digging and heaving, and carrying it between them, struggled back to the farmhold, where Lonio rolled it into the shed, already bursting with an odd array of churn handles, strips of cloth, horse trappings, thongs, hanks of cord, and all the harvest of his weirs, nets, and baskets. Over the cook fire, the mushrooms, eked out with the leftover griddle cake and a handful of early vegetables the children had found, simmered so deliciously that Taran and Gurgi needed no urging to stay for the repast. As night fell, Taran welcomed the family's invitation to rest by the hearth. Gurgi, stuffed and contented, began snoring instantly, and Taran, for the first time in many days, slept soundly and dreamlessly. The next morning was bright and crisp. Taran woke to find the sun high, and though he had meant to saddle Melonlass and be on his way, he did not do so. If Lonio's weir had yielded little the day before, the night current had more than made up for it. A great sack of wheat had somehow become tangled with a cluster of dead branches which served as a raft, and thus had floated downstream undampened by the river. Goywin, without delay, brought out a large stone quern to grind the grain into meal. All took a hand in the task, the children from eldest to youngest, even Lonio himself. Taran did his share willingly, though he found the quern heavy and cumbersome, as did Gurgi. "Oh, toilsome millings!" Gurgi cried. "Gurgi's poor fingers are filled with achings, and his arm with strainings and painings." Nevertheless, he finished his turn, although by the time enough meal had been ground, another day had nearly sped by, and once more Lonio urged the wayfarers to share his hospitality. Taran did not refuse. Indeed, as he stretched by the fire, he admitted to himself he had secretly hoped Lonio would suggest it. During the next few days, Taran's heart was easier than it had been since he chose to abandon his quest. The children, shy with him at first, as he with them, had become his fast friends, and frolicked with him as much as they did with Gurgi. With Lonio, each day he visited the nets, the baskets, and the weir, sometimes returning empty-handed, and sometimes laden with whatever strange assortment the wind or current brought. In the beginning he had seen no value in these odds and ends, but Lonio found a use for nearly all. A cartwheel was turned into a spinning wheel. Parts of the horse bridle made belts for the children. A saddlebag became a pair of boots, and Taran shortly realized there was little the family needed that did not, late or soon, appear from nowhere. And there was nothing, an egg, a mushroom, a handful of feathers, delicate as ferns, that was not held to be a treasure. "In a way," Taran told Gurgi, "Lonio's richer than Lord Gast is or ever will be. Not only that, he's the luckiest man in Prydain. I envy no man's riches," Taran added. Then he sighed and shook his head. "But I wish I had Lonio's luck." When he repeated this to Lonio, the man only grinned and winked at him. "Luck, Wanderer. One day, if you're lucky, I'll tell you the secret of it." Beyond that, Lonio would say no more. At this time, a thought had begun taking shape in Taran's mind. Nearly all of Lonio's finds had been put to one use or another, save the flat stone which still lay in the shed. "But I wonder," he told Lonio, "I wonder if it couldn't serve to grind meal better than the quern." "How then?" cried Lonio, greatly pleased. "If you think it can, do as you see fit." Still pondering his idea, Taran roamed the woods until he came upon another stone of much the same size as the first. "That's a stroke of luck," he laughed, as Lonio helped him drag it back. Lonio grinned. "So it is, so it is." During the several days following, Taran, with Gurgi's eager help, toiled unceasingly. In a corner of the shed, he set one stone firmly in the ground and the other above it. In this, he laboriously hollowed out a hole, and using the leftover harness levers, in it he affixed a long pole that reached up through an opening in the roof. At the top of the pole he attached frames of wood, over which he stretched large squares of cloth. "But this is no quern," Gurgi cried when at last it was done. "It is a ship for boatings and floatings, but there is no ship, only mast with sails." "We shall see," Taran answered. calling Lonio to judge his handiwork. For a moment the family stood puzzled at Taran's peculiar structure. Then, as the wind stirred, the roughly fashioned sails caught the current of the breeze. The mast-like pole shuddered and creaked, and for a breathless instant Taran feared all his work would come tumbling about his ears. But it held fast. The sails bellied out and began turning, slowly at first, then faster and faster, while below, in the shed, the upper stone whirled merrily. Goywin hastened to throw grain to Taran's makeshift mill. In no time out poured finer meal than any the quern had ground. The children clapped their hands and shouted gleefully. Gurgi yelped in astonishment, and Lonio laughed until the tears ran down his cheeks. "Wanderer," he cried, "you've made much from little, and done it better than I ever could." Over the next few days the mill not only ground the family's grain, Taran also struck on a means of using it as a sharpening stone for Lonio's tools. Looking at his handiwork, Taran felt a stirring of pride for the first time since leaving Craddock's Valley. But with it came a vague restiveness. "By rights," he told Gurgi, "I should be more than happy to dwell here all my life. I found peace and friendship and a kind of hope as well. It's eased my heart like balm on a wound." He hesitated. "Yet somehow Lonio's way is not mine. A spur drives me to seek more than what small Avern brings. What I seek I do not know, but alas, I know it is not here." He spoke then with Lonio, and regretfully told him he must take up his journeying again. This time, sensing Taran's decision firmly made, Lonio did not urge him to stay, and they bade each other farewell. "And yet," Taran said, as he swung astride Melonlass, "alas, you never told me the secret of your luck." "Secret?" replied Lonio. "Have you not already guessed? Why, my luck's no greater than yours or any man's. You need only sharpen your eyes to see your luck when it comes, and sharpen your wits to use what falls into your hands." Taran gave Melonlass rein, and with Gurgi at his side, rode slowly from the banks of small Avron. As he turned to wave a last farewell, he heard Lonio calling after him, "Trust your luck, Taran Wanderer, but don't forget to put out your nets."
Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.